What is going on, guys? My name is Will from Ghost Hack, and today I'm going to show you 10 secret tips and tricks about FL Studio that you probably do not know. Now, I do want to say that these tips and tricks are not necessarily a secret. Nobody is keeping them a secret. They are just a lot of them are kind of just hidden away in FL Studio that a lot of producers don't really know about. I didn't know about a lot of these until recently. And I just wanted to share the most useful tips and tricks that I knew. Tip number 1 is sound layering. What I mean by that is playing a sound such as this and this at the same time from different channels. All you have to do is open up this simple plugin called Layer. I didn't know what this is for a long time. Once Layer is open right here, all you have to do is make sure the channels you want to pair are selected. Click on Layer, and then you just have to hit, you gotta make sure they're selected. Then you have to hit Set Children. And now that's all you have to do. Now when you have the Layer channel selected, and I can play on my typing keyboard, I have played both of them. You can put down Midi, and you'll be playing both of the instruments at once. And you can do this to more than 2 instruments. You can do this to multiple instruments. This can be really handy when you're doing stuff like chords, or like if you have a bunch of chord patches that you want to play all at the same time, just the entire time. It's so much easier to just use a layer patch and you'd have less MIDI. Tip number 2 is track splitting. Now let's say you've created a beat such as this, hopefully a little better than this, and you have it down on your playlist while you're making your track. What if, let's say, you don't want to have both the 808 and the snare in the same pattern? You want them to be in separate patterns. Now, you could do something, kind of like copying the snare pattern, then deleting it, then going into a new pattern and pasting in the snare pattern, but there's a much easier way to do it. All you have to do is make sure you have the correct pattern selected here, pattern 1, then you just right-click and go down to Split by Channel. And now we have the 808 kick and the snare. It's so much easier to split it up using just 2 clicks versus, copying and pasting and making all these new patterns. It also auto labels it, which is pretty handy. All right, now let's say we're on the same beat here, but we want to make a variation to the snare. You can always do the make unique thing, and let's say I want to go, that's not that good, but let's just say that I wanted to do that. Now, if I want to merge both of these patterns right here, both this 808 snare 1 and the 808 snare 2, all I have to do is right click on the channel and hit merge pattern clips. And now it is all one pattern, so I can move it around as one pattern and edit as one pattern. Now, they don't have to be 2 different clips. See this 808 kick right here and this 808 kick right here. They're the same pattern. They're exactly the same. But we can merge those in exactly the same way. They don't have to be different. But something even cooler you can do, let's say you want to merge this 808 and the snare. You can merge it as well, but let's say you want to merge it on top of each other. Now all we have to do is put them both on top of each other and hit merge pattern clips. And now everything that was on top on this channel is all going to be one pattern. Just be careful when you're doing this in your track, because you don't want there to be anything else like way far in the back here that you cannot see. It's going to be everything on that channel. So normally what I do is I take the patterns that I want to merge and move them way down below everyone else, just to make sure that no other patterns get thrown into the mix. Tip number 4 is locking the channel to its content. Now, normally in any other DAW, such as Ableton or Logic or any DAW like that, you would have these channels right here specific to certain sounds. So you could not take pattern 1, which is the 808. You could not take pattern 1 and put it in pattern 2 with the snare. It doesn't work that way. You can't just put anything anywhere. You have them locked into specific channels. And a lot of people coming from Ableton or Logic or any other DAW don't really like this, having just an empty, however many, like 200 something channels, and, being able to put anything anywhere. They're not exactly comfortable with that. And if that isn't your workflow, that's perfectly fine. You can totally do that. All you have to do is go track 1, and then lock to content, have that selected. And then for track 2, I'm going to do the same thing, lock to content. So now when I paste something in track 2, it is always going to be pattern 2, right? But when I paste something in track 1, even though pattern 2 is selected, even though you see I'm pasting pattern 2, when I put something in track 1, it is always going to be pattern 1. You see, it's always going to be the 808s in this track and it's always going to be the snare in this track. And the great thing about this is you don't necessarily have to have all of them doing that. You can have just some of them doing that. If you want to put just little bleeps and bloops sound effects in one channel, you don't have to make a ton of different channels for each little piece of sound effect. You can just say, oh, this channel is just going to be anything, and that's where I'm going to put my random sound effects. See, something like that is very handy, and it helps you control your layout like really well. This next tip, it ranks up there with one of the best tips I've ever gotten from a producer about FL Studio. Let's say you're making an automation, right? Let's say I want to make an automation for the snare volume. Let's just say that. All right. So I create an automation clip, not knowing that I accidentally selected the pan. And then I create an automation clip. I'm like, oh no, it says panning. I just selected the pan. What do I do? Okay, well, I can delete the automation clip, and then I can delete this. However, the automation clip is not necessarily deleted. Let's say I want to pan the snare. What just happened? I panned it, but when I hit play, it snaps right to the middle. That's because in creating the automation clip, you had created a beginning point for that pan knob. That pan knob is always going to snap to the middle because that's where the automation was, even though you delete the automation. How do I undo that? I will show you how. Now my FL Studio is going to look a little bit weird because I have it stretched out between two screens, but what I'm going to need is this right here. So all you have to do to really get rid of that automation is you do this. You go into current project, you don't go into remote control, you go into patterns and initialized controls. You can see there's the snare channel panning. All right, what you want to do is right click, delete event. Now that event is completely gone. There's going to be nothing to do with the snare panning anywhere in this track. And then when I want to actually pan the snare, I can do it. That was tip number 5. Now for tip number 6, this is something that is very hard to display, to show you how, but it's something that you really should know if you're making really complex tracks that have a lot of layers and you're using a lot of plugins that take up a lot of CPU. We all have the CPU problem. But what this is switching on Smart Disable. Now there are a couple ways to do this. You can go Tools, Macros, Switch Smart Disable for all plugins, or you can go into your settings here, which I believe is, yes, in the audio, and you can hit this button right here, which is Smart Disable. Now what this does is when you have a lot of plugins, the only plugins that are actually going to be active, the only plugins that FL Studio will recognize are the ones that are playing at the time. Once, let's say if you have a lot of serums, but you're not playing all the serums at once, if you're just playing one at a time, when one is playing, FL Studio is only going to recognize that one. It's going to turn off all the other ones, which is going to save you a lot of CPU because especially for plugins like Serum that take up a lot of computer usage, you really want to have this on so it's not thinking about all the serums at once. It's only thinking about the ones that are actually playing. So it's a really good tip to save you CPU on your big projects. Speaking of Serum or any third-party plugins, let's say you were to open a third-party plugin and you start to jam a little bit on your typing keyboard. Obviously, be better than that. Now you might be playing the note and trying to edit the sound, but as soon as you turn a knob on here, it no longer lets me play the sound. I have to go up here and click. Then I can play the sound. Once you turn any of the knobs or press any of the buttons in Serum, it automatically cuts off your keyboard control. You have to click this fruity wrapper here in order to play it again. Now the way to keep that from happening is to go into the settings and hit Keep Keyboard Focus. Now when you hit that, this comes up. I do not know exactly what this means. If you get problems from doing this, then I'm sorry, it's never happened to me before, but all I do is I just hit yes, and then when I'm playing around, I can mess around with stuff and still play on my typing keyboard. Tip number 8 involves slide notes and slide note coloring. Now let's say you want to play something like this. Pretty boring, but let's just say you want to play that. But what you want to happen is you want this E to slide down to the B, and you want the A to slide up to the B. All you'd have to do, let's say if you want that the A to slide up to the B, is you just have to go up here and add a slide note. You can tell it's a slide note because of that little triangle. and now the A will slide up to the B. And the same thing could be achieved by putting a little slide note down here. Just make sure that the original note is longer. Now the E will slide down to the B. But if we play them all at once, this is what happens. Oh, the top one didn't slide up. This E went down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 semitones. And this A went down 5 semitones as well. It did not register this B. We don't want that. We want this one to go down and this one to go up. So what we are going to do is we are going to actually color them differently. Let's delete this. Let's go up into here and select a different color. Let's take this blue. All right. And now you can see that only the green one slid down to this green note. However, this slide note is not going to work with this blue note. This slide note has to be blue. Let's go ahead, make sure blue is selected, and create a little slide note. And now that they are both two different colors, they should each slide independently. That's a really fun trick for making cool melodies and chord progressions. Alright, the last two tips, 9 and 10, have to do with Edison. Tip number 9 is, let's say you have a recording of some kind of melody. In this instance, it's very, very simple and it could be easily, transferred into Midi just by ear. But let's just say I have something like this. If I want to get the MIDI out of this, I want to know exactly what notes those are. I don't have to go and listen through and recreate the melody in the piano roll, like in this piano here. All I'd have to do is right click, once I have the file selected, right click, go into Tools, and then Convert to Score and Dump to Piano Roll. Now when I click this, it is going to convert this score into MIDI and is going to dump it into whatever channel is selected. So I am going to go Tools, Convert Score and Dump to Piano Roll. And here we have it. It has the score pretty much perfectly. Tip number 10, final tip here. It's really handy. I found this out a while ago. I use it all the time on vocals. Let's just say I have this random vocal here.
The cheese of truth.
If I were to take this vocal and to put it into a sampler per se, then I could pitch it down. Let's say I pitch it down 600 semitones. And it's on auto right now. I could put it on stretch or something like that.
The cheese of truth.
And it just goes down in pitch and it goes down in formant. Now I could pitch it up and it would do exactly the same thing.
The cheese of truth.
But when we have this sample in Edison, we can do more than just changing the pitch and the formant and the speed all at once. What we can do is once we have the sample selected, hold Alt-T. And this will come up. This is the time stretcher and the pitch shifter. Now right now I just have the method on eGeneric. And the key about this is that we have formant preservation. Now I can change the pitch here. Let's say I take it down -6 semitones. You can see from the corner here. And when I preview it,
the cheese of truth.
That sounds like what we heard before. But we can also change the formant. Now that's how low it actually sounds. When I do the formant preservation to compensate for -6 semitones, it'll have the same formant as the original one, however, it will be lower in pitch.
The cheese of truth.
You can hear it's lower in pitch now. I can even do the opposite. I can keep it -6 semitones, however, I can bring the formant way down.
The cheese of truth.
Or let's say I wanted to keep it the same pitch and I just wanted it to be a lot lower formant.
The cheese of truth.
Maybe even lower.
The cheese of truth.
Or maybe I want him just to make him sound like he has a higher pitched voice.
The cheese of truth.
Then obviously all you have to do is hit accept, and then you have it. I apologize for my sample choice, it was just a random Vine sound. But anyways, there you have it. There is my list of the 10 top tips and tricks for FL Studio that a lot of producers do not know about. Now if there are any other tips and tricks that you would like to let us and any other producers know, tell us down in the comments below. We'd love to get your input on that. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Happy producing.